of, and you can put this down, but I'm not sure if I'll have it in the story. There were a group of Navy people and others, I'll put it that way, including Dave, who felt that in some respects our government, put it that way, and that's what it would have been,
Okay.
was actually baiting, B-A-I-T-I-N-G,
Yeah.
the Japanese
Yeah.
come and attack Pearl Harbor. There were just too many things that were unexplained, and I'm going to go ahead and finish this part, and I'll get back to the part that
Okay.
you
Do
can
you want to put in this?
you can-
Okay.
The first thing that this group knew or was for was the fact that they had I was a Navy pilot World War II. And even I was in the blimp squadron, but even in the blimp squadron, we kept one blimp flying all the time.
Oh, I didn't know
Every
that.
time, yes. And in fact, the rule was, aviation rule was, if you were in a combat area, you kept at least 1/3 of your aircraft aloft all the time.
So they couldn't be
Now,
hit on
this
the ground.
didn't always
Okay.
work off aircraft carriers because they would be moving in an area where
Yeah.
they might not have
Yeah.
considered a combat area, but
Okay.
and they wanted to be fully fueled at any time they
Mm-hmm.
left. But at any rate, but the same thing was true of ships. You didn't keep all
Keep
your
them
ships
away. Yeah.
in one place at one time,
Yeah.
any time.
Yeah.
But here they had all the battleships in a perfect line. Well, it was on what was
Yeah.
called Battleship Row,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
were
I've
all
been there.
tied up there.
Yeah.
And then they put, their excuse for doing this was that they might have saboteurs. They put old ships and tied them up out alongside of them. Those ships couldn't even move if there was a real breakout of hostilities, and there wasn't, fortunately.
Yeah.
All this was hostilities. It was short. It was. I don't think it lasted more than 15 or 20 minutes. The whole attack.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they had it. They knew exactly. I'm satisfied in my own mind that each pilot coming off of their aircraft carriers knew exactly where he was going and what ship he would be sinking, and he would go on his way and go back to the carrier. And that's almost what they did.
Yeah.
There were a few exceptions to that, but this was the forerunner of everything.
Yeah.
But then, before the Japs actually struck, there were two-man Japanese subs. One was actually in Pearl Harbor. He had followed in under a ship coming in, and the other was just outside of Pearl Harbor. They captured both of them. How they did it, I'm not sure.
So the Americans captured both of them.
Yes, yes. But this was like 3-4 days ahead of the attack. And there are those that feel that this should have been a clue to somebody, and let's get ready for something.
Well, yeah. I
And
mean,
they
because those can't
They-
have a very
they
long
did.
range.
Yeah, right.
Two-man subs, right?
And now there's some other things that showed up later. Now these thoughts occurred after the attack. Some of these were ahead of the attack.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
This is no way to protect our ships. But
Yeah.
anyway, when Dave and his commanding officers and company moved the first time from the radio shack, and you'll hear what that is when we get into the start of it. They moved into an empty munitions dump right there on Ford Island.
Before the attack.
Well, no, this was after
After
the
the
attack.
attack. Oh, okay.
But they moved. But they learned that this munitions dump was empty before the attack.
Okay.
It had never
It had
had
never had
anything
anything
for a
in it.
long time.
Yeah.
why, this other question, why? You know, that's what it's there for. Why didn't they have munitions?
Yeah.
Then another thing occurred. Dave was before he was transferred to Ford Island and became the head of that communications area, at his level, of course. He was in a PBY squadron. The PBY was a flying boat, patrol boat. Y meant 2 engines.
Okay.
Patrol boat, I can't think of the other one, was the 4-engine one. It had another letter at the end of it. But this was a PBY squadron. There were 12 planes. Those planes never, on the day of the attack, they didn't even know there was an attack. There was no explanation of why they weren't out patrolling, some of them at least, even though it was Sunday.
And this was these were aircraft.
Pardon?
These were airplanes.
Yes, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and these were the same planes, maybe some of the same ones, I don't know, were at Midway and picked up the Jap fleet coming in then.
Okay.
They're the ones that were the center of the early activity, actually, with their bombs and the machine guns. But anyway, they were in port, tied up, nothing done with them, and there may very well have been there were those that said they didn't think they even flew the day before. Now, had they been patrolling like we were taught to patrol,
Yeah.
and I don't think they were Navy pilots, they were no different than anybody else,
Yeah.
they had all the same training.
Yeah.
They would have picked up this group sometime
Before that, yeah.
before that, or been suspicious that there was something going
Yeah.
on. But anyway, that's all. Now, after that, you can either include or exclude that. I'm
Okay.
not even sure it should be in there, because I'm sure it would step on somebody's toes.
Yeah, it
a
might.
little
So,
bit,
yeah.
because there's too much politics involved in
Yeah.
the whole situation. But now, I'll
Okay.
tell you about Dave.
All right. Your brother.
Yeah, my brother Dave.
Yeah.
He really, and I'm going back just a little bit. He was really my big brother.
Okay.
He was 5 years older, and I can remember on a couple of occasions I would be having trouble going to sleep. We slept together. And in those days, in fact, at one time there were 3 of us slept in the same bed.
Yeah.
But this particular time, it was just he and I was having trouble going to sleep. And he sang to me.
Yeah.
And it worked. I went
Yeah?
to sleep.
What did he sing? Do you remember what he sang?
One of my favorite songs, and his too, was "Home, Home on the Range."
Okay.
With the deer and the antelope.
Yeah.
Anyway, but he graduated from high school. He was, I think he was close to being valedictorian of his class, but he wasn't. He wasn't.
Pretty
but
smart
he's
guy though. Yeah.
up in probably the top 5 in his class. He went on. My dad and he did not see eye to eye on many things, and this is one of always the sad parts of my life, because and I don't know which one worked harder at trying to get along, but I don't think either one of them really worked real hard at it.
Okay.
But at any rate, my dad, my older brother Howard, who was a member here too, and died when we buried him on his 101st birthday.
Oh, okay.
And, but anyway, he was a school teacher that had gone 2 years to college, and gotten a teaching certificate and taught. And most of the grade school, particularly the rural grade school teachers in those days, that's what we
Yeah,
had.
that's what that. Yeah.
But anyway, Howard was one, very successful, and that's what my dad thought Dave should do, go 2
Yeah.
years to Western. He went 1 year,
Mhm.
and when he came home, he announced that he was going to join the Navy.
Oh, Dad was not happy.
And my mother and dad both were unhappy about it, but more especially one of his real close friends who died before he got in the Navy with an appendicitis attack, and it ruptured. It was just one of those days they didn't have these.
Yeah, that's what happened. Yeah.
It took a half a day to get him to the hospital. But at any rate, he also tried to talk him out of it. He said, "You don't want to go with the Navy," but he did. And this would have been in, I think, probably 1936, something like that, when he enlisted. And I'm not going into the realm. He worked his way up through the. Well, when he finally got out of the Navy, he was a chief electronics technician's mate, the
Okay.
highest rank you could get in the radio area of in the Navy. And in truth, that was his reason, really. Well, and this
Yeah.
could be worked in if it, but then by the time he got to that stage, the war in Europe had ended, and he went to Italy and chaired or was a foreman or whatever on putting up new lines all over Italy.
New communication lines, because they've been wiped out, I guess. Yeah.
And he got that done. And then they shipped him he went to Brazil, back in the sticks. I don't know, for the same purpose. But during all this process, in Brazil, they lost his orders. And he actually was lost. They didn't, even Mary Jane, his wife, couldn't
find him.
couldn't find him. And he finally made contact outside. It suddenly dawned on him, there's something going screwy here. So he got a hold of the right people, and they got him out of there, and everything went well. But then Patty, their daughter, was born, and he told him he was done. He got out. Otherwise, he would have stayed in and made a career of the Navy. But he said, "I'm not going to do this and have this happen to my family." So,
yeah, and that's really because he was in. If he joined in 1936, he had been in by that time 10, 12 years, right?
Pardon?
He had been in like 10 or 12 years by that time.
Yeah.
So he was pretty close to having a career already.
I think he had 2 hash marks, and that
Yeah.
meant he would have been in. I think he was in his third
Tour
enlistment.
enlistment.
They enlisted in those days 4 years at a time, and anyway. Now we go back to Pearl Harbor.
Okay.
Of course, he was there. None of us knew. We heard nothing. It went on for, I think it was close to Christmas before we got it. And all then we got was just a postcard that said, "I am okay." Nothing else on it.
But so you knew all about the attack and everything. You just had no idea if he was
we
okay.
didn't realize how much he was involved. But at any rate, his station, his radio shack, that's what they called it, but it was actually a room atop the Marine barracks on the Ford Island. And it's sort of, the Marine barracks, its building sort of paralleled the tie-up of all the Battleship Row.
Okay.
Battleship Road would run like this, and the Marine Barracks would run off like this.
Okay. Yeah.
But his station was right up here. It was right up at the, almost at the opening where you came into the harbor from the sea.
Yeah.
And at the very entrance, pretty close to the entrance to the harbor.
Okay. So on the open end, not on the closed end. Okay.
Pardon?
On the open end of
Yes.
the harbor. Okay.
Yeah. And the USS California, which was the first in the head of the Battleship Road, was tied up like, from here to about the length of a block.
Okay.
Really, is about
Yeah.
how far it was from his,
From his
where his. In fact,
location,
he could, if he could have leaned out the window far enough, he could have thrown a rock or a baseball and
Yeah.
hit the California. He was that close to it. And he was witness to the very first activity. He heard the engines, heard the noise,
Wow.
and the next thing he knew, he heard gunfire and bombs dropping.
Wow.
And they came just one here, one here, one here, one here, and as I said, I'm one that's convinced of this too, and there are many others are,
Yeah.
that they had, they knew exactly where they were headed, what they were going to be doing, and then they were going to get out of there, and that's what they
Yeah.
did.
How did they know?
Pardon?
How did they
Oh,
know?
they had, I'm sure they had spies. They're right there on the,
Okay.
and we may have even known who they were. And this is the part no one will ever know.
Yeah.
All of the blame for Pearl Harbor, and I'm going to continue this after this, all the blame for Pearl Harbor is put on the admiral and the general that were in charge of the various functions of they called it the Hawaiian frontier, I think, sea frontier. But at any rate, the admiral was in charge of the Navy and the general in charge of the Army.
Yeah.
And there were few Marines, not too many. And but at any rate, this was all going on, and his commanding officer, who's they also had rooms in the Marine barracks. And his commanding officer come running up there and said, "What in the hell is going on?" And that was the words Dave said he used. And he said, "We were under attack." And of course, Dave was probably, if not the first, one of the very first to witness anything that was going on.
Yeah.
Because he was right up there on top. And it wasn't very long after that, his commanding officer handed him the note. He said, "Send this now." And it was the message, "Attention all units, air raid Pearl Harbor, this is no drill." And this was the word I say was I'm going back to the start of the Revolutionary War, the shot heard around the world.
Yeah.
Well, this was the message heard around the world.
Yeah.
That the United States was in the war. And President Roosevelt called it the Day of Infamy, or a Day of Infamy. I'm not sure whether it was a "the" or an "a," but a Day of Infamy. But after, and I don't know how long, and Dave said he really couldn't remember either, how long that they were in the Radio Shack. The planes I guess had quit. In that time, the area had been just torn to bits. The airfield, can't think of the name of it, but I will in a minute. Near Honolulu, which was torn all to pieces too. Their buildings shot up and what have you. People killed everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
But at any rate, his skipper, that's what they called what he was referred to, said, "We're going to move out of here." And he told Dave to get all of his radio equipment together. He says, "Well, I'm going to have he said, where are we going? And he said, well, we're gonna find someplace else other than here. And he said, well, I'll have to have some kind of a thing to move it, as radio equipment. He
Yeah.
had there in that
Can't
shack.
just carry it on your back, yeah.
And so they did, and they moved into this, as I said, they moved into this empty ammunitions dump.
Yeah.
And they were there, it was right on the island also, on Fort Island. And it wasn't very long to one of the lesser officers went to the skipper. I think their highest officer at that point was a commander, but an admiral joined them later. But at that point, I think he was a commander. And he said, I don't think we should be here. He said, if the Japs come, they were always under the assumption the Japs were going to return.
We're gonna come back, yeah.
And they got in there and they said, and his commanding officer says, you know, you're right. We've got to get out of here. So Dave had to pack up all his radio equipment again. This time they moved into they call them mountains, the hills above Honolulu.
Yeah.
And they went into secret hide. It was actually into a hiding place.
Like a Diamond Head area?
And that became the center then of the command center for the Hawaiian Islands for that time on. And Dave was in fact, his truth of the matter is, I think he was probably the most senior radioman on the islands at that time, and he was only a radioman second class.
Yeah.
He hadn't been first class radioman yet. So, but he had, he started sending messages and receiving messages, and he did that not continually because they had moved to the two places. But during that time, for 36 straight hours, he was awake and working on radio messages.
And moving radio stuff around.
And finally, he turned to whoever was in charge at that point and said, I'm gonna have to get some sleep. He says, I'm getting to where I can't even read.
Yeah.
And so they did. And at that point, I think they brought in another striker who was going to be a radioman, but I wasn't quite ready yet.
Yeah.
But he could receive.
Yeah.
And they put him at receiving messages coming in. And then they had another, I think one of the senior officers was able to send Morse code. I learned Morse code. All the pilots.
Yeah.
All Navy pilots had to learn to send and receive up to 35 words of Morse code.
Morse code. Yeah.
And they were strict on it. You had to be able to do
That was important communication, yeah.
Pardon?
That was an important form of communication.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because that was the communication of the day. It wasn't any of this where you could put a thing in and they'd go around the world.
Yeah.
At any rate, that pretty much is the story. I'm not sure the date. Mariella has the card, and it has a date on it, but it was sometime after Pearl Harbor before we heard. And that's an interesting story too, because my dad was a board member of the Menard Electric, and he, in fact, he was one of the people, the three men that went to Washington and got the rural electrification into this area.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And but he was treasurer, I think, of the board. But anyway, they were having a meeting. Their meeting place was right across the street. Well, it was where down where. You know where the post office is? Well, it was across the street this way from the post office.
Okay.
And they were having a meeting in there, and the postmaster saw this card came in, or somebody said, hey, we got a card for the Montgomery kid. Yeah.
I'm gonna go put the
Okay.
message up.
All right, thank you.
And
Oh, let me just tell.
yeah.
Rebecca, did so there's those little key things. They work on those little screws down at the bottom. And then there's a stick hanging on the back of the sign, and it holds. You can put it in there and hold the sign up so it doesn't. That doesn't make sense, does it?
Okay, so this is,
That's the open on the bottom. There's like three little.
You're a nice puppy
screws.
dog.
Okay.
Yeah, you smell my kitty cat, don't
And
you?
then you lift
I
up.
got a kitty
the
cat, yeah, and she gets up
plexiglass
on my lap.
oh,
Yeah.
so the stick is
Yeah,
to
she
hold the
does.
It's to hold
plexi.
the plastic.
She
back.
gets
Gotcha,
up on my
gotcha.
lap.
There's like
You
a
wanna get on my
key.
lap? Huh?
The
Okay,
key
I'll
part
do
goes
it.
in the back and
You
then
get
it comes
over
out
it.
front. And
Yeah,
it's
and you have to lay down, yeah.
I'll figure it out. Okay, I'm
Okay.
glad you explained that, because I'm like, I thought it swung open to the side. I didn't realize. it
Yeah,
swung
I did too. And when she was showing it to me yesterday, I went, "Oh, that's kind of cool."
Okay, all right, thanks.
Oh, you got your friend there.
Yeah, I told her she'd get over on my lap. I have a kitty cat
Yeah.
that jumps up on my lap all the time. And
I'm gonna
she
get-
may have smelled her.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But,
I'm gonna get a picture of you guys
anyway,
there. There.
the postmaster,
Mm-hmm.
he happened to be a good friend of my dad's too.
Yeah.
He saw this, somebody said, hey, we got a card from,
Yeah.
they were keeping track of all the service guys, you
Mhm.
know, that they had, maybe somebody had been inquiring
Yeah.
if this guy. But anyway, the card came and they took it right
They went
over
right
to
over.
him. He had special delivery of that card.
Yeah.
And of course, the word went out. Now, I want to go. Now, the next layer I'm going to is by now, by this time, we had the draft going.
Okay.
You know, you even know what the draft
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
It was
That's
conscription.
fast.
Pardon?
That's quick.
Yeah. Any rate, I had by this, we're moving on up now to 1942.
Yeah.
I was a sophomore at Illinois College,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm registered for the draft, but farm boys, I was a farm kid,
Mhm.
farm boys were automatically deferred.
Okay.
And I didn't think it was right. I still don't think it was right. It should have been treated just like all the other.
Well, you were needed to grow food, so.
Yeah. But anyway, I was at Illinois College, and there were 5 of us that worked for our meals at the local college cafeteria.
Yeah.
And a Sunday, Sunday's lunch was always served a little later than the normal
Uh-huh.
days. Well, Saturday and Sunday,
Yeah.
really. But I think it was, I don't know, like 12 o'clock, maybe 12:30, we would go over to we didn't have to, and on those Sundays, or on these Sundays was one, it was strictly a cafeteria. Everybody helped themselves.
Okay, yeah.
And they didn't need us there until it was time to start clearing tables and
Yeah.
washing dishes and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. So we were a little later than normal going, but I remember I was walking across the campus from my dorm. There were 3 of us, and 2 others came out of another dormitory. We were walking by, and one of them said, "Where the heck is Pearl Harbor?" And he didn't use heck. He used
Yeah,
another
I used a different word, okay.
And I said, "Well, it's in the Hawaiian Islands. Why are you asking?" He says, "Well, the Japs just knocked it."
Oh, and that's how you found out?
Yeah, and that was how I found out about it.
Wow.
And I got on to and then by the time we got into the cafeteria, everybody there, they had heard about it. And Marv Mutenob, who was one of my good friends, we played baseball together, he was a senior, and he was the chief waiter, was there. And we were getting there, and he had already made arrangements with the hierarchy. He says, "I'm going to have to get out of here." He was from Davenport, Iowa. He says, "I'm going to have to get home." He says, "I don't want to wait until they draft me. I'm going to have to get," and he knew everything would speed up at that point. And he did, and that way he could go home and enlist and do what he would go into the
Yeah.
service he wanted to go, and he enlisted in the Navy rather than be drafted just to wherever they
Into
wanted
wherever,
to go.
yeah.
But he only had about 6, no, not quite that much left of the term we were in,
Yeah.
and so they gave him full credit
Good,
for
yeah.
that term, but he still had one term to go to get his
Degree.
and as it turned out, he didn't, because he got sent to another college for officers training,
Uh-huh.
and they let him. He had all his records with him, of course, and when they looked at him, they said, "Well, there's only really 2 subjects you need
Mm-hmm.
to get your degree, and you can take those even though it might not be part of your curriculum." So he did, and he got his degree from,
Oh, good.
I think it was University of
Yeah.
Iowa, I think it was, where he got his degree
Yeah.
from. But anyway, we stayed in touch, but he walked out that day. He says, "I've got to get home." And this was the turmoil that college was in, because
Oh, yeah.
those who were 18 or older would have been eligible for immediate drafting.
Yeah.
And those under that, not necessarily.
Yeah.
Only if they wanted to be drafted,
Yeah.
then they could. But at this point, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I told my folks, I said, I'm not gonna stay here on the farm. I'm going into service.
Yeah.
And they agreed with it. And one day I was walking through the administration building on the college, and there was this placard standing over one of these that folded like this and came out like this, and on it was this thing, B5 Naval Aviation. I don't
Yeah.
remember all the words. Available for, you must have at least 2 years of college.
Uh-huh.
And at the end of that year, I would have had my 2nd year, and so
Yeah.
I enlisted in what they called the B5 program,
Okay.
which was Naval Aviation.
Ah.
And I stayed at home then. This was in the summer. I'd already finished my 2nd year. This was in the summer when I finally got all my enlistments worked out. And I got called to St. Louis for my physical and everything I had to go through there, which was really strict. And
Yeah.
I passed everything. And I said, "But what do I do now?" To this old chief who was sort of in charge of it. He says, "Go home. We'll call you when we're ready for you." And I thought I went home thinking, well, in a couple of weeks they'll be calling me. Time went on. We came on up to, this was October, and it was in February before I finally got my call.
So, a year into the war then? Yeah.
Yeah. And but anyway, I went to, actually went back to college because we had, much of what we were doing was considered college
Yeah.
credits. So
Yeah.
I was the